My son told me to give him my 5-bedroom house, as if he were correcting a mistake on a form. Mom, Evan said, folding his hands on the table. This place is too much for you now. The story you are about to hear is a work of fiction created by the Her Chains channel team, based on real-life situations to convey lessons about family, emotions, and human values. All characters and events are illustrative. I waited for the rest. He didn't ask how my knees were holding up. He didn't ask if I felt safe living alone. He didn't even ask if I wanted company. He looked at me the way people look at a problem they expect to be solved. It's not really for me, he added, voice steady. Lila needs stability. I stared at him. Stability from what? He shifted, already irritated. From moving around, from renting, from not knowing where she belongs. I nodded slowly. And where do I belong? Evan frowned, as if the question surprised him. You've always managed. Mom, you're good at that. There it was. Not a request, a reassignment. I am Danai Mercer. I am in my early 70s. I bought that house on Chicago's North Side after years of saving, working, and surviving things I never complained about. 5 bedrooms, 1 for sleep, 1 for guests, the others for the quiet I earned. Evan knows this. He grew up watching me count every dollar and still make it work. Lila and I talked. He continued. We could really make the space work. We'd take the back room, the one with the light. He was already dividing it. I laughed once, short and sharp. You've planned this. He didn't deny it. That's when I understood. I wasn't being asked to help. I was being managed. I leaned back and kept my voice even. You shouldn't worry so much about pleasing your favorite woman. Evan stiffened. What does that mean? Especially, I said, meeting his eyes, when she isn't even my daughter. His face drained of color. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time since he arrived, he looked uncertain. I stood. We're done for today, as he gathered his coat. Confused and unsettled, I realized this conversation didn't begin here. It began years ago, and if I was going to explain how we arrived at this table, I had to go back. Chicago did not welcome me. It tested me. When I arrived in my 20s, I thought hard work would be enough. I married Richard Mercer believing love could soften anything. Richard used to say, "We'll figure it out, Dane." And for a while, I believed him. Then he got sick. "I'll be back before dinner," he told me the morning he collapsed at work. He never came home again. After the funeral, people spoke softly, as if volume alone could break me. Evan was still a boy. He clung to my coat and whispered, "Don't leave me, Mom." I told him I wouldn't. I meant it. I worked wherever someone would take me. A factory during the day, cleaning offices at night, caregiving on weekends. When supervisors asked if I could cover extra shifts, I said yes before they finished the sentence. You never complain. One manager told me once, almost impressed. I smiled. Complaining felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. When Evan asked why I was always tired, I told him. This is how we keep the lights on. When he wanted something I couldn't buy, I said, maybe later, and then stayed up late doing the math again. Chicago winters were long. Layoffs came without apology. Rent climbed while wages stood still. I learned how to stretch meals, how to pretend exhaustion was normal, how to carry worry without letting it show. Evan grew up watching me manage, not struggle, manage. Mom's got it. People said when things got tight, I never corrected them. By the time Evan left for college, he believed stability appeared when you needed it. He believed resilience was endless. He believed I was built for sacrifice, and I let him. I became the reliable one, the woman who always made it work, the mother who never asked for relief, only adjusted. Chicago eventually gave me something back. Not kindness, not ease, but proof proof that I could survive anything long enough for people to forget that survival was never meant to be permanent. After Richard died, I made a decision I never said out loud. I would let Evan be soft, even if it meant I had to be steel. When bills came in, I paid them before he saw the envelopes. When the car needed repairs, I took extra shifts instead of explaining why we couldn't go anywhere. I learned to smile through conversations I should have had honestly. "Are we okay?" Evan asked me once. Standing in the kitchen with his backpack still on. "We're fine," I said, without hesitation. That answer became a habit. When the heat went out one winter, I slept in a sweater so he could keep his room warm. When tuition letters arrived, I told him not to worry about costs. "Focus on school," I said. "I'll handle the rest." He believed me. By the time Evan was a teenager, he didn't ask how things worked. He asked when they would work out. If something broke, he assumed it would be fixed. If plans fell through, he expected someone else to adjust. "Mom, can you figure it out?" he'd say, already walking away. And I always did. I told myself this was love, that easing his path was kindness, that my exhaustion was temporary. When Evan left for college, he hugged me tightly and said, "I don't know how you do it." I laughed. "You'll never have to." I meant it as comfort. I didn't hear the lesson I was teaching. As an adult, Evan carried that belief with him. When rent went up, he complained, but not with panic. When jobs disappointed him, he waited for a better option. Stability, to him, was something that appeared if you were patient enough. When I tried to explain limits later, he listened politely, then brushed it aside. "It'll work out," he said, using my own words. I realized too late that I had taught him something dangerous. I had taught him that my strength was endless, that my role was to absorb pressure quietly, that accommodation was not a favor, but an expectation. There was no villain in those years, just a boy I loved, and a mother who mistook protection for preparation. I met Lila Harper at a dinner Evan insisted on hosting. "She's excited to finally meet you," he said, smoothing his sleeve as if preparing for inspection. Layla stood when I entered, smiling with practiced warmth. "Dane, it's so good to finally be family." The word landed softly, but it stayed with me. She complimented my cooking without tasting it. She admired my patience, my strength, my independence. Each praise felt rehearsed, like a script she had memorized. "You've done so well for yourself," she said later, glancing around my living room. "All this space must feel comforting." I nodded. "It does." She tilted her head. "Evan and I talk a lot about space, about what it represents." Evan laughed. "Lila thinks long-term. Responsible people do," she added gently, placing her hand on his arm. Over time, her comments came in pieces. Never requests, never pressure, just assumptions wrapped in politeness. "5 bedrooms is generous for one person," she said once, almost thoughtfully. "I like hosting," I replied. "Of course," she said, smiling. "I just meant eventually." Eventually became a word that followed me. Evan started repeating her phrases. Long-term. Practical. Makes sense. He said them as if they were facts, not opinions. "You don't really need all that room," he told me one afternoon. Casual. "Lila worries about you rattling around alone." "I don't rattle," I said. He shrugged. "She just cares." Lila never asked for the house. She talked about lifestyles, futures, what people our age should simplify. She spoke as if my life were a draft waiting for revision. At a family gathering, she laughed when I declined a suggestion. "You're funny, Dane. You always think you have to hold on to everything. Hold on to, as if what I had earned were clutter." The pressure never arrived loudly. It arrived smiling, reasonable, patient, and slowly. I realized something unsettling. Lila did not see my home as mine. She saw it as unused potential. Evan began to see it the same way. They were not waiting for permission. They were waiting for me to step aside. Evan didn't ease into it. He waited until his coffee cooled, then spoke like the decision had already been approved somewhere else. "Mom, we've talked it through," he said. "It makes sense for you to sign the house over." I blinked. "Sign it over to whom? To me," he replied, calm. "So Lila and I can settle in." I set my cup down. "Settle in where?" He gestured vaguely. "Here, the house. You don't need all this space anymore." I didn't raise my voice. "I live here. I know," he said quickly. "But you're older now. 5 bedrooms is a lot." "For whom?" I asked. "For anyone your age," he said, then softened his tone. "Lila needs roots. She's tired of moving." I waited. He didn't add anything. "And me," I said. "What happens to me?" He hesitated. Just long enough to show he hadn't prepared for that part. "You'll be fine. You always are." I leaned back. "That's your plan." "It's not a plan," he said. "It's practical." "Practical for whom?" "For us," he said. Then corrected himself. "For Lila." There it was. Clean. Unapologetic. She deserves stability. He continued. "You taught me that." "I taught you to work." I said. "I taught you to wait your turn." He frowned. "Why are you making this difficult?" I laughed, short and sharp. "Because you're asking me to disappear. I'm asking you to adjust," he said, irritation creeping in. "You've always managed." The words landed heavier than he intended. I saw it in his face when he realized what he had said. I nodded slowly. "So this isn't about need." He looked away. "It's about what makes sense." I understood then. I wasn't a mother being asked for help. I was a resource being reassigned. My comfort was negotiable. My safety was assumed. My life was flexible because it always had been. Evan waited for my answer with the confidence of someone used to compliance. I didn't give it to him. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed listening to the house settle, the quiet stretching until it felt louder than any argument. At some point, I gave up pretending rest would come and stood up. I moved from room to room without turning on lights. I didn't need them. My body knew this place better than my mind did. In the smaller bedroom, I remembered Evan at 10, asking, "Are we staying here forever, as long as we need to?" I told him. He smiled like that answer meant safety. In the hallway, I stopped where I once leaned against the wall after a double shift. Shoes still on, telling myself I would sit for just a minute. I sat for an hour. In the kitchen, I heard my own voice from years ago, calm and steady. "We're okay." I said it so often that it became a promise I felt obligated to keep, even when it cost me. This house had absorbed everything I didn't say, every compromise, every night I chose quiet over honesty. Every time I told myself there would be time later, I realized something then. Standing alone in the room Evan wanted to claim. This house was the only thing I owned without condition. No shared name. No borrowed stability. No explanation required. I had worked for it. I had waited for it. I had protected it without realizing I was protecting myself. Earlier that day, when Evan spoke, I had felt small, reduced. Like my needs were a footnote to someone else's plans, but here, in the silence, that feeling shifted. I sat on the edge of the bed and said out loud, "No." The word felt unfamiliar, not angry, not loud, just real. I had spent my life adjusting so others wouldn't have to. I had called it love. I had called it strength. But as the night dragged on, something hardened into clarity. Giving up this house would not be generosity. It would be erasure. And for the first time, I understood that saying no was not cruelty. It was the last thing I still had the right to do. I called Marianne Holt the next morning. Marianne had known our family for decades. She was the woman people went to when they needed something explained without sugar, a retired paralegal. Precise, unsentimental, honest to a fault. I need you to tell me something, I said after she answered. And I need you to tell me straight. There was a pause. You sound like someone who already knows the answer. I think I do, I said. I just need to hear it from someone who understands paperwork better than promises. I told her what Evan had asked. I told her about Lila. I told her the way the word family had been used like a lever. Marianne didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said quietly, Dane, when did Evan tell you they got married 2 years ago? I said. Courthouse, small, practical, and you never saw the license. She said, not a question. No, I said. Another pause. Then, because there wasn't one. My grip tightened on the phone. What do you mean, I mean? Marianne said carefully. They filed paperwork to apply. They never completed it. No final filing, no legal marriage. That's not possible, I said. Evan repeated what Lila told him. She said, and Lila stopped just short of lying in a way that leaves a record. I swallowed. So the family narrative was built on assumption, Marianne said. On presentation, on people not checking. I closed my eyes. The pieces fell into place with sickening ease. The entitlement, the confidence, the way Lila spoke as if she already belonged. She's not my daughter, I said. The words settling into their true shape. No. Marianne replied, she never was. I thanked her and hung up. My hands shook, but my thoughts were steady. This wasn't rage. It was clarity. Lila hadn't just expected my house. She had assumed a status she never earned, and Evan had carried that assumption like a shield, never questioning who had handed it to him. When I stood up from the table, I felt something solid beneath my feet for the first time in days. The lie had done its work for years. It wouldn't do it anymore. Evan came back 3 days later. This time, he didn't come alone. Lila stepped in first, smiling as if the last conversation had gone exactly as planned. Dane, she said warmly, setting her purse down like she belonged there. We didn't want things to feel tense. Evan nodded. We just want to talk it through. I gestured to the chairs. I didn't sit. Lila looked around, eyes moving with purpose. I've been thinking about how we could repurpose the back bedroom, she said casually. It would make a perfect office. Evan works best with natural light, Evan added, and the smallest room could be storage. You don't really need it anymore. I said nothing. Lila continued, encouraged by the silence. We'd keep your room exactly the same, of course, until you decide what you want to do next. What I want to do next. I repeated. She smiled, unbothered. Downsize. Maybe. Something simpler. Less to manage. Evan leaned forward. This doesn't have to be complicated, Mom. We're already thinking long-term. I looked at him. You're thinking long-term for yourselves. He frowned. That's not fair. Lila's voice softened. We're family. This is what families do. The word didn't land the way she expected. I watched her closely now, the certainty in her posture, the way she spoke as if permission were a formality. She reached toward the hallway. The front room could be a nursery someday. It's perfect. I felt the shift then. Not in them, in me. They were dividing something that was no longer available to them, counting rooms that had already closed. Evan waited for me to respond. Confident, impatient, Lila studied my face, searching for the version of me she had rehearsed against. I folded my hands. You've made a lot of plans. Evan exhaled. Because it makes sense. I met his eyes. Only if the ground stays where you think it is. They exchanged a glance. Confused. For the first time, Lila hesitated. I stayed quiet. Let them sit with it. They had come ready to claim. They had not come ready to hear, no. I didn't raise my voice when I finally spoke. I didn't need to. No, I said. Evan laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. Mom, don't do this. I am doing this, I replied. I'm saying no. Lila straightened in her chair. Dane, this isn't about pride, it's about what's practical. It's about control, I said. And I'm done pretending it isn't. Evan's face hardened. You're letting your emotions get in the way. I looked at him steadily. I know you and Lila are not legally married. The air changed. Lila's smile faltered. That's none of your business. It became my business when you used the word family to take what isn't yours, I said. Evan stood abruptly. Who told you that you should be asking why you didn't verify it yourself? I said, but I know the answer. You trusted what benefited you. That's not fair, he snapped. You're twisting things. I'm naming them. I said, there's a difference. Lila crossed her arms. So what? You're punishing us over paperwork. I'm protecting myself from entitlement, I said, and from being erased. Evan shook his head. After everything I've been through, you're choosing this moment to draw lines. I didn't choose the moment. I said quietly, you did when you decided my life was negotiable. You always said family helps family, he argued. I said family respects boundaries. I replied, you replaced that with convenience. Lila scoffed. You're being dramatic. No, I said. I'm being finished. Evan's voice rose. You're selfish. I didn't flinch. I've been generous my entire life. This is the first time I've been honest. Silence followed. Not the fragile kind, the final kind. I opened the door. You need to leave. Evan stared at me, waiting for hesitation. When it didn't come, his anger gave way to disbelief. You're really doing this, he said. Yes, I replied. I am. Lila gathered her things first. Evan lingered, searching my face for the mother who would back down. She didn't appear. When the door closed behind them, it didn't echo. It settled. And for the first time, the word no felt like ownership. I didn't tell Evan what I did next. I didn't warn him. I didn't ask for his opinion. I sat across from a lawyer named Thomas Reed, a man who spoke plainly and didn't flinch when I said, I want this to be final. He nodded. An irrevocable trust will do that. I don't want conditions. I said, I don't want exceptions. You'll still live in the house. He said, but no one can pressure you to give it away. Not now. Not later. I signed the papers with a steady hand. When the ink dried, something old and heavy lifted off my chest. Evan found out a week later. He showed up furious. You went behind my back. There was nothing behind your back, I said. You just assumed you were standing in front of me. You locked me out, he said. No, I replied. I removed the leverage. Lila didn't speak. She watched him argue, watched him lose ground with every sentence. A month after that, Evan called again. His voice sounded smaller. She left. He said, I didn't ask why. We both knew. Without the house, well, there was no future to plan. No rooms to count. No advantage to protect. Lila had never wanted a life with limits. She wanted a shortcut. Evan lost more than property. He lost the story he told himself about who he was and what he deserved. For the first time, no one adjusted to save him. I didn't think you'd go this far, he said. I didn't think you'd ask me to disappear. I answered. That was the last real conversation we had. I stayed in my home. I slept in my bed. I walked through every room knowing it was mine in a way it had never been before. There's a lesson in this that took me most of my life to learn. Love does not require self-erasure. Family does not mean surrender. And strength is not proven by how much you can endure, but by what you refuse to give away. Revenge didn't look like shouting or punishment. It looked like permanence. It looked like boundaries written into law and honored in silence. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like the video, subscribe, or share your thoughts in the comments. These conversations matter more than people admit. I didn't take anything from my son. I simply stopped letting him take from me.